It is the year 2060 AD, and the Roman Empire is actively tearing itself apart. The state is currently trapped in the darkest phase of what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. Germanic tribes are crossing the borders, rebellions and internal usurpers are fracturing imperial authority, and plagues stalk the major cities. Emperor Valerian needed to restore faith in Rome. To prove that the state was still strong and its imperial authority intact, he desperately needed a massive morale-boosting victory on the battlefield. Taking a massive gamble, Valerian marched an immense army of roughly 70,000 troops eastward to the city of Edessa, determined to crush an invading force and secure his triumph. To accomplish this, Valerian relied heavily on the sheer mass of his traditional Roman foot soldiers. He operated on the assumption that the heavy infantry tactics that built the empire would easily secure a victory, entirely missing that the rules of warfare on the eastern frontier had evolved. Valerian's fatal flaw began with a deep misunderstanding of his enemy. For centuries, Rome's primary eastern rival had been the Parthians, a formidable but largely decentralized and internally divided empire. But the Parthian dynasty had been overthrown decades earlier. In their place stood the newly formed Sassanid Empire. Led by the ambitious King Shapur I, the Sassanids operated a highly centralized state with an aggressively revamped and modernized military machine. Unaware of the sheer operational upgrade his enemies had undergone, Valerian was marching a slow, traditional infantry system straight into a highly specialized military buzzsaw. When the two forces finally met outside Edessa, Shapur immediately seized the initiative. He commanded a highly diverse army and used it to dictate the exact pace of combat. Shapur positioned his mounted archers on the wings of the battlefield. Equipped with superior composite bows, these riders unleashed a relentless barrage, peppering the Roman lines from a distance. This presented a massive tactical problem. Because the Sassanid archers fired on horseback, their extreme mobility made them virtually impossible for the heavy Roman infantry to catch or engage in close-quarters melee. This lethal harassment achieved a specific goal. It successfully forced the massive Roman army to hunker down into a static defensive posture. They were now pinned in place, exactly where Shapur needed them to be. With the Romans locked in a defensive formation, Shapur unleashed his elite striking force, the cataphracts. These were heavily armored cavalrymen, where both the rider and the warhorse were covered in overlapping metal plates. This diagram illustrates the sheer physics of a cataphract charge. A fully armored rider atop an armored warhorse generates incredible forward momentum. In motion, this unit produced upwards of 1,500 pounds of raw kinetic energy, crashing forward at a dead sprint. When that mass collided with the Roman front lines, the physical impact was catastrophic. Shields shattered upon contact. The sheer force was enough to break limbs right through the Roman armor, while long Sassanid lances pierced deeply into the clustered formations. Shapur exploited this physical advantage through a tactical masterstroke called cycle charging. His cavalry would strike the infantry for a brief, devastating engagement, and then quickly disengage before the Romans could strike a killing blow. As they pulled back, a fresh wave of cataphracts would crash into the line. Rome had no structural answer to this. Roman swords struggled to penetrate the overlapping chainmail plates, and foot soldiers simply could not flank a target moving that fast on horseback. The Roman front line was slowly being ground to dust by sheer kinetic attrition. The continuous cycle charging created extreme environmental chaos on the battlefield. Thousands of stampeding hoofs churned up massive, opaque dust clouds, severely limiting the Roman infantry's visibility at ground level. Under the cover of this blinding dust, Shapur executed his final tactical maneuver. He secretly dispatched thousands of reserve troops to flank the heavily engaged Romans while they were pinned and blinded by the cavalry assaults. The Roman command structure was caught entirely off guard. By the time they realized the massive Sassanid deployment moving around their sides, it was reacting far too late to counter the threat. The Roman flanks were completely pinned. The hammer of the cataphracts had successfully driven Valerian's army straight into an inescapable anvil. Surrounded and exhausted, the 70,000-strong Roman army rapidly disintegrated. Once the lines broke, thousands of soldiers were slaughtered where they stood, while others fled the field in mass panic. In a desperate effort to maintain cohesion, Emperor Valerian stayed on the field. but his army had fallen, and in the chaos, Valerian was captured alive by King Shapur. Later Roman authors circulated horrifying rumors regarding his captivity. Some accounts claimed that Shapur used the captive Roman emperor as a human footstool every time he needed to mount his horse. While historians debate those exact details, the ultimate failure is indisputable. Valerian died in Persian captivity, suffering a level of humiliation that no Roman emperor before or after him would ever endure. The disaster at Edessa acted as a brutal stress test for the entire Roman military apparatus. It definitively proved that Rome could no longer rely solely on its traditional heavy infantry operating system to hold the borders. In response to this crushing defeat, Valerian's son Gallienus, and later Emperor Aurelian, initiated sweeping military reforms, systematically modernizing Rome's armies to directly counter the lethal Sassanid threat. These structural updates to Rome's military doctrine effectively saved the state, ensuring its survival for decades to come. The legacy of Edessa proved a harsh reality of ancient warfare. Even the world's greatest superpower must either adapt to lethal new technology or face total annihilation.